Today we'll be reading Raccoon Olympics, which is a true story told in a funny way. I'm 11 years old, wearing a hand-me-down tie-dye t-shirt way too big for me, and soccer shorts, my legs riddled with welts from black fly bites. My hands still reek of snake musk from spending the morning looking for snakes in the woods around the lighthouse. I'm sitting at the picnic table, telling my dad about all the garter and fox and ringneck worm snakes I caught, when the park naturalist Paul King stops by to inspect the live traps under the lilac bushes beside the table. He pulls the big trap out from under the leaves to reveal one big raccoon. So we can tell so far, our main character, of course, 11 years old, and we are in a park, right? She's been spending the morning outside looking for snakes, trying to catch snakes. And the naturalist at the park, one of the scientists at the park, stops by to look for a raccoon in a trap nearby where she's sitting. So Paul, our naturalist, is getting the raccoon out of the trap. So she's going to tell us about Paul. I like Paul. He has spent every summer in the park for decades and knows everything about Rock Island. He's a walking encyclopedia of its history, geography, plants, and wildlife. My family is spending the week as volunteer docents on the island's restored lighthouse. Paul checks on us most days. He tells us to where to turn off the official trails to see secret places regular visitors don't get to go, like the coyote dens and the natural rock windows in the cliffs and the ruins of the old fishing village. The day before, Paul told me a ghost story about the St. Martin's Lighthouse just across the channel. So we have a little bit more information about our setting here. So turns out that our narrator is spending a week on Rock Island, helping to give tours of this old lighthouse on the island. And Paul knows a lot about this island, is telling them everywhere that they could go on the island. So we've got a little map here, Rock Island Lighthouse State Park. So we are in sort of upstate New York area-ish. This is called Thousand Islands area. So right off of Lake Ontario. And here is the channel, the St. Lawrence Channel, right? This body of water in between New York and Canada here. This line here down is Canada. So this is where we are, Rock Island Lighthouse State Park. We've got a lot of tiny little islands all around here in this area that the narrator is going to continue to talk about. So the day before, Paul told me a ghost story about the St. Martin's Lighthouse just across the channel, so across that big body of water. A long time ago, the lighthouse keeper's 4 children got caught in a squall in their rowboat and drowned. Paul pointed out a buoy near the tip of the island and told me the keeper's ghost still walks that beach every night with a green lantern, searching for his lost children. That night, I stayed up, peeking out from behind the curtains, and saw a green light bobbing over the water, exactly where Paul said it would be. So we're learning a lot about Paul here, right? He knows everything about this island. We know that he is catching raccoons in traps, and that he has told our narrator a ghost story. So kind of think about, what kind of people in your life like to tell ghost stories, right? What kind of people like to entertain you with a ghost story? So now we've learned about our setting. We've learned about Paul, right? Our narrator kind of stopped what she was talking about to tell us about Paul, but now we're going back to our present sort of timeline here, where Paul has pulled the trap out from under the leaves to reveal a big raccoon. So our narrator actually the dad asks, it's a state park. Why do you trap raccoons? My dad also likes talking to Paul. He smiles with his eyes and leans forward, resting his elbows on the picnic table. Paul stops, dragging the trap towards his ATV. ATV is like a four-wheeler. No predators on the island, Paul explains. When there gets to be too many raccoons, they start to make nuisances of themselves over in the campground. So it sounds like Paul is trapping these raccoons because the island would just get overrun with them. There's too many, there's no predators to keep them in check, and they would bother the people that are trying to visit. So Dad asks, "What do you do with the raccoons after you catch them?" Paul sits down at the other end of the table. "Well, we used to release the ones we caught over on Washington Island, but the residents complained." He looks at me carefully. Paul has only 4 teeth and a white beard that wobbles when he talks. His eyebrows look like albino woolly bear caterpillars. His face reminds me of Abraham Lincoln, asymmetrical, homely, wise. So we decided to train ourselves a swim team for the Raccoon Olympics. I scooch closer, sensing a story. So Paul's going to explain, right? Dad asks, what do we do with the raccoons after we catch them? Well, we used to release them on a different island, but they didn't like that. So he's going to tell us a story. "Ever heard of the Raccoon Olympics?" Paul asks me. I shake my head. He winks. "No? Well, some raccoons are very good swimmers, but we want to find the best for our Olympic team. So whenever we catch one, we have tryouts." So we can kind of tell here, right, that he, is looking at her carefully. He's winking at her, our narrator. The way he's talking, she's sensing a story, right? We can guess that maybe he's not being 100% honest, right? We're not really catching these raccoons for the Olympic team. Paul doesn't really say what the raccoons look like when they swim, but my swimming raccoons, right? The raccoons the narrator is imagining. My swimming raccoons wear goggles and have special swim caps fitted over their ringtails to decrease drag. They front crawl through the choppy green waves on Lake Michigan. My raccoons swim with excellent form and breath control, pointing their toes as they kick and remembering to breathe on alternate sides. I'm missing summer swim team practice this week while we stay at the lighthouse. It will not occur to me until I am an adult to wonder if Paul convinced all the kids he could train wild raccoons to compete in swim meets, or if he just made up a kinder explanation for me. So she's imagining these raccoons swimming like she does at swim practice. And she's wondering, right, is he telling this silly story about training raccoons to swim? Is he just telling me that story just to be nice because he doesn't want to tell me the truth? Or does he tell everybody this silly story? The raccoon in the large have-a-heart trap beside our picnic table hisses and grips the wire mesh. I had seen raccoons before, staring shiny-eyed into the beam of my flashlight and skulking down storm drains, but never up close, in daylight. Raccoon paws look like tiny human hands. I know raccoons can swim. They eat fish and leave little handprints all over the sandy patches of the beach at night. I picture nocturnal lap swim sessions in raccoon-sized lanes with little log floats holding up the lane lines. Even in late June, Lake Michigan is so breathtakingly cold that jumping in the water feels like getting punched in the stomach. But maybe the raccoon's fur helps them stay warm. So even though our setting is not on Lake Michigan, this is her sort of experience with swimming in that type of water. It's very, very cold. So she's, hoping and imagining that these raccoons, well, I know they can swim, I know they eat fish, and they have fur to keep them warm. So she's sort of hopeful that, maybe Paul is telling the truth that they're swimming. So, to test their swimming, we drive the raccoons out into the middle of the lake and put them in the water. If they're good swimmers, we start training them for the Olympics. Every day, taking them out a little bit longer to increase the distance they can swim. The park rangers have an old wooden fishing boat with peeling forest green paint and a partially enclosed cabin topped with a bulky marine radar receiver. I imagine Paul and Ranger Kirby with clipboards and stopwatches, pacing the deck and yelling encouragement like real swim coaches. So Paul is saying, he's driving these raccoons out into the middle of the lake, right? Lake Ontario is where we said we were close to. Right? Yes, Lake Ontario. Okay. And, we as readers understand that if they're in the middle of the lake, they probably don't have a lot of chance to survive, right? Paul is taking these raccoons off of their island because if he took them to another island, people would complain. That's what he said. So, sadly, this is just part of, protecting their island is that we have to take these raccoons out to the middle of the lake. And they're not going to survive. But he's telling her this story, right? We're going to train them. We're going to see how far they can go. And she's imagining, Paul and Ranger Kirby being real swim coaches. Unfortunately, we have not found our champion yet, Paul winks again. But he's looking at my dad, not me. Dad catches my eye as if he wants to tell me something, then looks away. I wonder if Dad has heard of the Raccoon Olympics before. I'll ask him later. As Paul packs up the trap, I wait until I think nobody else is listening and whisper to the raccoon, "Good luck, little guy. Swim fast." So, Paul, at the end of the story, we kind of see, okay, Paul is winking, right? Usually people wink, especially grown-ups when talking to kids. They wink when they're maybe not telling the whole truth. So Dad catches her eye and maybe wants to tell her the truth about what's going on with the raccoons, but decides not to, right? This is kind of a fun, cute story where our narrator is imagining these funny little raccoons training for Olympics, like in the, like her in her own swimming lessons. And she's imagining this sweet story. And, this super nice guy, Paul, is telling her the story just to be kind and to entertain her and to make her smile.